Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Office of Research and Innovation for today's Social Media for Researchers webinar. I am Taylor Yarbrough, Coordinator for the Program Development and Outreach Team in the Office of Research and Innovation. I also run our office's social media accounts. I will moderate today's discussion. Joining me today for this panel are Paul Bottoni, Dr. Kinder Seaman, and Dr. Nikki Delk. Our first panelist is Paul Bottoni. Paul is a senior social media manager for the Office of Communications. Paul has been part of this group since 2014 and has helped run the main UT Dallas social media channels throughout that time. He also maintains the Telescope, the blog found on the UT Dallas Magazine website. He has a background in journalism and has received CASE awards for writing and social media. Our second panelist is Dr. Kinder Seaman. Dr. Seaman is the director of the Aging Well Laboratory in the Center for Vital Longevity and an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology in the School of Behavioral and Brain Sciences. She also serves as a co-director in a scientific research network on decision neuroscience and aging. Her research is dedicated to using basic and translational scientific research studies to promote health and well-being across adulthood. Her lab uses a variety of behavioral modeling and neuroimaging techniques to better understand how the mind and the brain change as people get older. Dr. Seaman completed her BA in psychology and biology at the University of Kansas before joining Teach for America. After teaching in Oakland, California and Washington, D.C., she completed a master's and PhD at the Catholic University of America. She completed postdoc in the Motivated Cognition and Aging Brain Lab with Gregory Samanas Larkin at Yale and Duke Universities before joining the faculty here at UT Dallas. And our final panelist is Dr. Nikki Delk. Dr. Delk is a tenured associate professor in biological sciences, the assistant vice president for research development, and fellow Cecil H. and Ida Green professor in the systems biology science at the University of Texas at Dallas. She was also recently named as a Cell Press list of 1,000 inspiring Black scientists in America. Her lab studies inflammation-induced breast and prostate cancer progression and treatment resistance, and her research is supported by funding from the University of Texas at Dallas, National Cancer Institute, and American Cancer Society. After receiving her bachelor's in math from Georgetown University, she was commissioned as an Air Force officer where she served for 4 years before obtaining her doctorate in molecular biology from Rice University. She obtained her doctorate in order to pursue her childhood dream to become a cancer biologist in honor of her grandmother who passed away from cancer. She was a postdoctoral fellow at MD Anderson Cancer Center and a postdoctoral and faculty fellow at Rice University before joining the faculty at UT Dallas in 2014. Dr. Duck also loves to paint and dance, and in 2021, she started Arts for Science to do STEM outreach throughout the arts. Thank you all to our panelists for joining us today. Before we start, I want to remind our audience to leave their questions in the chat. We will also be hosting a Q&A session at the end of this panel. To get us started, I will have Paul take the virtual mic. Paul?
Thanks, Taylor and Danny, for having me, especially with some very accomplished co-panelists, feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome here. Yeah, I've been with UT Dallas since 2014. Started with magazine mainly, but during that time I was helping out with our social media group. It was kind of a shared duties at that point, and in 2018 I took it over full time. So I'll give you all just a small crash course in some best practices with social media. First off, shameless plug. These are some of the channels we monitor and handle. So you can see Facebook, Instagram, X, though it's always Twitter to me, LinkedIn and YouTube. There's a few others that are included in here, but it's mainly to feed these others, to be honest. All right, just to start off, just to kind of get a broad picture of current trends, these charts are both from the Pew Center, the Pew Research Center. I'm not really a fan of how all of them were worded, but basically the gist is that these are a snapshot of some of the more popular channels per audience. So on the left here, you'll see among adults, and then on the right for teens. This is kind of shows you just briefly where people are most of the time if they are using social media. For adults, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You'll notice that X and Twitter, X/Twitter is closer to the bottom, but I will get into this kind of with an asterisk for my opinion. Then if you're trying to get to future students, on the right, again, YouTube, TikTok, although we are not on there at the moment, Snapchat, Instagram, and surprisingly, Facebook rose even just a little bit. I was surprised it rose at all. So I have links to these full surveys at the end of this PowerPoint if anyone wants a copy of that, just for general curiosity. So back to X and Twitter, I will say, though it's lower on this list for adults, I will say that I do see researchers and academics using that a lot still. So while on this broad spectrum for adults, it might be lower, I would say that if you are trying to reach peers or other institutions, or just trying to spread or join conversations in your specific area, it's still probably worthwhile being on there, even though it is highly annoying and it frustrates me every day, and I have many opinions on some of the things that have changed there, but won't get into that because that could take all day. All right, so I know there's probably a range of people here, from people who are using social media a lot to maybe those who might just do a little bit and want to improve their social media game a bit. So just some things to consider, and it's good for everyone, whether you're a power user or just getting into it. Knowing your audience, who you're trying to reach, is very important, because that will shape some of these other things as well. So say you're really wanting to just spread word about your research or join into conversations of that, then you would want to kind of go towards the channels, maybe Twitter, and using different hashtags that your field may be using. And I'll get in hashtags in a minute as well. So knowing your audience, so like if you're trying to recruit students to your lab or to your program, then going where they are would be important. So Instagram, things like that. Goals, what are we trying to achieve with our social media? Are you just trying to recruit? Are you trying to spread awareness of your group, your lab's work? Are you just trying to do a general awareness of your research, and the good thing with goals, you don't have to have just one. It's probably a mix of all. That's definitely the case for us at the main channels. We have to do crisis communications, we do marketing, we share our news press releases, we do general videos just to showcase campus, to just spread the brand awareness of UT Dallas. So it's probably a little bit of everything, but if you're trying to focus in a primary area, that might shape the content you post. A content calendar. I know we all have a lot of hats to wear, and I can't imagine everything that goes into the academic side of it as well, and the time commitments everyone has. If you were able to, there are a bunch of free options, Hootsuite being one that comes to mind, where you are able to schedule out posts. So if you have a window, if you have someone in your area, a student worker who can help do this, and you vet that content before it goes out, this keeps you on top of posting consistently, because consistency is important with social media. If you post every 6 months, people aren't going to follow your channel, or they're not going to see it most of the time, because it's just, there's so much content out there these days, and there's stuff constantly being posted and replacing content in feeds, so it continually gets pushed down. So if you're just posting once, it's like shouting in a big vacuum, really. And so you need to be consistent. So a lot of the times we will post a story once or twice 3 times on Twitter, just because we know it might take more than one time for someone to notice it in their feed. Facebook and other channels are a little different. Those algorithms are wonky, and so you don't want to post too much. It's kind of nuanced, and I'd be happy to meet with anyone individually to discuss content plans and things like that. Channels, which channels should you focus on? I always tell folks who are just starting channels for their group or departments to start small and make sure you can feed the channels you have before just getting things, starting everywhere and then not being able to feed all those channels. So if you want to start small with Instagram, if you're trying to reach students and bring awareness to students who you want to participate in your program or potentially be workers or student researchers, that's I'd start with Instagram. If you're trying to reach academic peers, Twitter's a great place. And there are a lot of alternatives to, and I'm sorry, I keep calling it Twitter. I know it's X, but it's still in my brain as Twitter. There are alternatives to Twitter, although we haven't found one that's stuck. We are on Threads, and Threads continually, it seems like the Meta team is committed to making that work, because like I do, you never know when you wake up and you get a 404 alert when trying to get to Twitter, and you never know when it might the wheels fall off. So we are on Threads as a backup, but it's still not perfected, and there's still issues with that. We tried Mastodon, but that gets a little complicated. And there's been a few others that have their brief time in the sun before kind of losing wind in their sails. So still a lot of academic discussions on Twitter. And so for the time being, if you're open to being on that channel, then it's still, I think, a little bit worthwhile. Hashtags, okay. Hashtags, they're still getting used, but I would highly recommend that you do a quick look in your academic area, your field of research, to see which ones are used the most. A lot of the times I see, and not really here, it's everywhere, people starting their own hashtags, and that can be great, especially if they catch, gain a foothold and people start using that. But that's more often not the case, and you start just using the same hashtag and nobody else is using it, then no one's really seeing it if you're trying to get a discussion going. So I would recommend looking into hashtags that peers or other institutions or departments use across the social media environment, and see which ones are used most. And I would use those, and that way your content, if you're trying to reach those discussions, gets noticed easier. And then tagging, if you have important news or a fun update, and sharing a photo, make sure you tag if your department's on social media, if your school is on social media, even tag us. We can give it a like, and sometimes we retweet and things like that. We get a lot of requests, so we can't always do it, but it's fun to know those things because you never know what that might lead to. Tons of times I pass along posts I see to our communications managers for maybe media pitches or possible stories. So those things do sometimes originate on social media and things we find or get tagged in. So I think it's very beneficial to tag and still use hashtags. I wouldn't use a ton. Pick a few, because if you list a whole bunch, then people sometimes will just be like, nope, too much to read, I'm not going to look at that. And they just scroll right past it. So I would be strategic in which ones you choose. Some content examples. There's two from UT Dallas, and then one that I think, if you are interested in doing video, which if you have the time and you have the resources, maybe some student workers to help you with, it can be beneficial, because that is content that is being pushed heavily right now. So I'll share that one last. So if you're trying to think of things you can share, one thing that's always great is if you have PhD candidates that you're seeing through, and they successfully defend their dissertation and get that point these types of posts are always great, you know, showcasing when that accomplishment happens. Content for your channel, it showcases, hey, we successfully have another PhD right here. It showcases the success of your department, and so it's just general great for the brand. Dr. Prasad, I can't see who all's in here if she is or not, but great on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great place to connect with colleagues too. It's definitely more of a professional environment than some of the other channels. And you can spread awareness of your successes and things of that nature, and still use hashtags and tag other colleagues. If you have a research paper and you have co-authors at different institutions, you're able to tag them on LinkedIn and they join the discussion. So this is another great example. You know, see if you get a news hit, that's always great to share anytime your work gets highlighted. And then this is a vertical video. Oxford does a lot of these. Some involve more editing than most. This one's, I think, though, easily produced. It's just done on a cell phone camera, facing, you know, turn to selfie mode and record. And it's a quick 30-second soundbite. I'll try to play a little bit just so you can get a sense of it.
Do you sometimes find yourself aimlessly scrolling when you know there's a lot of messages from friends to respond to elsewhere? That's not as unusual as we might think, because responding to a message of a friend you care about actually takes some time and requires you to put in some effort, especially if they've asked you questions that are not just very easily answered in a minute or two. Whereas scrolling passively is something that we often do to self-soothe, to sort of distract ourselves or to get away from a busy day.
All right, I won't play the whole thing, but anyways, it's if you're trying to showcase your research, your field of study, something you've been working on, you think there's general interest, doing a quick video talking about something that your research can apply to in everyday life, that tends to get noticed and picked up on social as well. And if you have student workers or anything like that who can help you post that, I think those things are easily produced and don't need a lot of editing and things like that on the back end. And not everybody I know can do that kind of level of content. But I wanted to kind of show an array of different possibilities that we might not have thought of before.
Do you sometimes find yourself
that's playing again. Sorry. Let's go to the next. Oh, if it'll let me. There we go. All right. I know we have plenty other folks to get to. So if you have any social media questions after this, you can always reach me here. If you ever have any ideas with media pitches that you might want to do, our office is great with that as well. And then just some sources here for the Pew Research posts. So if you need those, I can get those to Danny to share later. But I believe now it's Dr. Siemens' turn to present.
Okay. I am not an expert in social media, but I kind of stumbled into this as I started my assistant professor position. But I will echo a couple of things that Paul said. First, I agree that Twitter and /X, and it is Twitter for me as well, is not a great way. It's not a great platform, but it's kind of the best we've got. We've done a lot of exploration of other things and have landed back on Twitter as a compromise. But people are still pretty active on there, at least in my field. So it seems to be everyone's tolerating it for now. And then I will also echo his comment about tagging in posts. I think that has been really useful for me, because then a lot of times, like, I'll tag my center, I'll tag UTB research, and then they'll retweet, and then it gets it out to a broader audience than you know, the people that are just following me or my lab. I thought it might be useful to see some examples, so I did some screen grabs. That's what my slides are. So see if I can get things moving forward. Okay, so here I have just an example of my Twitter X bio. So some things, I like to put a picture at the top, or a lab, like something related to my lab at the top. So right now it's a picture of my lab, although it needs to be updated. This was from a couple years ago. I have my title in my, you know, right above my handle. so that people can see, I'm a professor, I have a doctorate. And then I have some important links in my bio. So like I'm the co-director of a scientific research network that I'm trying to promote. So I make sure to put that in the bio, and I have a link to that organization's Twitter account there. And I have I've also linked to our lab's website in my bio. So I think those things are important to do to kind of get, people linked to the other more in-depth resources if they're looking to learn more about you. I also wanted to point out that you can pin things that are the most important to the top of your profile. So this is, now I'm switched to the research network I run. We give out awards every year. And so we've pinned to the top of our bio the deadlines for all of those awards and a brief description of them, because that's what we really want people's eyes drawn to when they come to our Twitter account. So just a plug for pinning. I also threw in an example of my LinkedIn bio. So here you see a different picture related to my lab's work. So we study the brain, and this is actually a pet image from some of the work that I've done. For some reason, my picture isn't shown on here, but it's the same image I use everywhere. I also just show you that I have links to things like the website. So if you click there, it will take you again to my lab's website. And then here on LinkedIn, I have a little bit more information. It's very similar to what you heard at the top about my background and what my lab does. And I link to specialties, things that I have a specific specialization in. Social media is not one of them. Okay, so then I thought I'd show a specific use. So whenever we're publishing a paper on Twitter, we like to put a thread up for that paper. So here's an example of one of those threads. So I usually use emojis to get attention. So if it's a paper, I'll do these alert like, ooh, it's exciting, we've got a new publication. I try and tag my co-authors if they're on Twitter. I put a title, the title of the paper in the tweet, the first tweet. This is actually one that I have a figure from the paper in it. And if you click on the figure, it will actually hyperlink to the paper. I feel like I probably got this. The journal actually had an option to click to share on social media, and then I modified their, verbiage to conform with this. So that's like the very first tweet, but then I do a thread below that kind of gets into like, what is this paper about? So that, researchers were busy people. If I really want to get their attention, I want to explain like why they want to go read and learn more. So I usually have a brief explanation of the study. I like to put a relevant GIF, however you would like to pronounce it, to get attention. This is not dynamic. I didn't get fancy enough to actually show you, but this GIF is actually her smiling, which is important because that's actually what the research is looking at how people feel whenever they see people change their emotional expression. So in this particular instance, it was really nice to have a GIF. Then I have more explanation of what we actually did and a link to prior work that we built on. So another paper that we built upon for this study. And then I actually have a figure from the paper and a really brief summary of what those results looked like. And then I usually end up with like, why is this important? Why should people care about it? And then because, again, I'm not an expert, I usually forget to tag people. And so this is my last thing, is me actually tagging the groups that I think would be interested. So you can see I've tagged CVL Neuro as the center I'm in, BBS here. And then I also tagged Duke Brain, which is the Duke Institute for Brain Sciences. And that's where the work was actually started out whenever I was a postdoc there. So I tagged it, and some of my colleagues on the paper are also in that group. So I tagged them as well. So that's an example of a Twitter thread to advertise a paper. We also, again, switching gears, I also run this research network. We put on a lot of events. And so I wanted to show you what that could look like on Twitter. So here, I noted that this was a missed opportunity for more emojis. We could have put little calendar. I like to use little calendars whenever I'm telling people that an event is coming up. I like to give the critical information, who, what, where at the top. And then I have a link to the website that we are using for this event that has more information and how to apply. And again, this was another GIF that had the equations floating across our face. Sorry again for the lack of video, but you can go to the Twitter, or you can go to the X website and see it in real time if you want. And then I have a thread below that that's getting into more of the details. So more description. I tagged the presenters so that they can see this and they can retweet it. And then more information about the application. So that's an example of an event. Then I have another example for something that's happening right now, and I'm trying to get people, to come to my event right now. So another emoji for prevention, picture for attention, and tagging the relevant orgs. And picture, these are two people that work in my lab, and I'm biased, but I think they're pretty great. So don't you want to come talk to these people? I think that can be really helpful. All right, now I'm switching platforms to LinkedIn. So here's another LinkedIn example. Again, critical information at the top, website for more info, emojis for attention. And then this is something, I can't take credit for this. I actually have a worker in my lab who came up with this, a postbac RA actually, who came up with this, who got pulled out the endorsement from a prior recipient and posted that in this picture. So you can see that gets a lot of attention and gets a lot of credibility and buy-in for the program that we're trying to get people to apply to. And then the other thing I just wanted to throw out here, because I'm a psychologist and I feel like it's my responsibility, is I wanted to share a conversation that we had about thinking about whenever you're posting the images and things. A lot of times people put images out there. Think about maybe some of the implicit bias you might be falling into whenever you're selecting what you're putting up on your social media. So like, this is a conversation I have permission from SETA to share this. We were talking about which picture to use for our announcement about this workshop we're putting on. And I said, yeah, let's get something with math and somebody doing mathy things. And she's like, oh, here, I liked this one. And I was like, that's great. That's exactly what I was talking about. Except if you can find one that's not a white man, that would be ideal. And I put that because we often associate white men with things like math and science. And so I was like, if you can find, anything else, that would be great. And so she found another one. I said, let's do it. And that's where we went from there. So I just wanted to bring that up as, just like maybe one last gut check is like, okay, wait, am I falling into any of my own implicit biases with what I'm posting? And with that, I am done. So I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Dr. Seaman. Do you have anything you would like to add to what was previously discussed, Dr. Delk?
Good morning. Thank you. Those were fantastic presentations from Paul and Kendra, and I'm actually personally learning a lot. And I have just a really quick anecdote. I recently got on social media professionally, maybe a couple years ago, and that's because it was advised to me when I was going up for tenure to have a professional social presence. So I'm personally learning a lot from your talks today. And then in terms of implicit bias, just anecdotally, my lab tends to have a lot of females. And so a lot of what I post shows women. And a little 9-year-old boy, I was sitting on the plane next to him, and I was telling him about what I do, and I was showing him the social media. And he asked me, are little boys allowed to do science? Because he saw it was all girls in the lab. And I told him, yes, little boys are allowed to do science too. But that just goes to show how, it does matter how you represent.
Thank you, Dr. Delk. And now we're going to move on to our Q&A portion of this webinar. Okay, so the first question I have is, what is the best time to post on social media? Morning, afternoon, or evening?
So I can take that question. For me, I end up posting when I have time, which tends to be very, very late at night after my day has ended. That I think seems to work, because then in the morning when people wake up, it the first thing on their timeline, and it gives them the whole 24 hours, because this is typically stories so that I'm posting. And so it gives the 24-hour day for people to see it come across their timeline. But that's me personally. I do very late at night, post very late at night.
I can jump into it really, for us, it kind of depends on the channel and the audience. So it kind of fluctuates. What I've always tried to do is, I think morning's great because, you know, people look at their phones, they're waking up or having coffee, start scrolling. So that's a good time. Lunchtime is another time I try to schedule things because people are taking a break. Then early evening when people get off and then they just jump on and try to, well, they start scrolling is when they do. For us, slow times are kind of that 2 to 5 window. It's really, really slow. But again, sometimes it's trial and error too. You might just need to find when your audience engages most, and then kind of shape your content on different channels to meet that.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in and say as well, I'm with Nikki. It's kind of whenever I think to post. Sometimes it depends on what I'm doing. So again, for this network that I run where we're trying to get stuff out, I'm often doing those posts during the day because that's when I'm working on things. And a lot of times I'll be on social media, you know, in the morning or in the evening, and that's when I'll be reposting things that other people put. I guess that's something we haven't really talked about, is if you really want to get more followers and you want to engage, that you should be looking at what's on your feeds and reposting things that are of interest and are relevant, because you know, I hate to say it, but if you scratch someone else's back, they're going to scratch yours. So people are going to repost your things if you're also reposting theirs.
That's a great point. Yeah. And that, yeah, it builds followers too, like you said. And that's why tags are important too. I will add, this is another great thing about content calendars. A lot of them have, so if you are only available to, like, okay, I have a free moment, I can do something on social, but it might not be the best time for your audience. A lot of them have ways to, you can schedule that. So you can go ahead and shape up the content the way you want it. Instead of saying send now, you can pick the time that you want and the day that you want. And that way it's done. You don't have to worry about it. You can check it off. And there's also options like, if a bunch of them now too can say, hey, I want to run this time, and I actually want to do it multiple times. And you can schedule out several times for a tweet to go out. That can be beneficial if you do it too much to where it's the same post a bunch. Sometimes people start to ignore that because it's not different. But we do that for, so we have an Eclipse panel coming up at the end of the month on the 26th with some UTD faculty as well as the Dallas Morning News moderator. So we'll be promoting that, and we'll be sending out multiple tweets and posts trying to get people to come out to that. So Hootsuite's a great one that I think has a free option. It's pretty intuitive, and you can connect different social media platforms to that, and sometimes you can shape them all at once and say, hey, I want this to go out at the same time on all these different channels, and you don't have to go to each one to do the same work. So not everybody can, I know time is a huge commodity. So not everybody has the time to set that up, but if you are able to, I think content calendars are very handy. And they have apps too, so you can even do it on your phone.
I'll jump in and also add that when we are promoting an event or there's a deadline for something coming up, sometimes what we'll do is we'll retweet or repost or whatever they're calling it now on X, the original, but then we add a little thing at the top, like, you know, this deadline's coming up or whatever. So that we're not having to constantly recreate, you know, content, but you know, we can just build on what we've already put out there. But it's also new enough, I think, that that it still gets eyes on things.
Wonderful. It looks like we got some more questions in the chat. This one is directed toward Dr. Delk and Dr. Seaman. Do you have a lab and personal account? If yes, how do you balance the content between both?
So I can address that. I do have a lab and I do have a personal account. The personal account stays personal, so I don't mix the two. However, so I have a lab account. And I primarily use Instagram. So I have an Instagram Arts for Science account. I have an Instagram Delk Lab account, and then I have an Instagram me personal. And so the public accounts, of course, anybody can be part of that. Now, what does happen is whatever I post on my professional Instagram accounts does go to my personal Facebook. And the reason I do that is because I have so many followers on Facebook already. It was going to be too much to create another account. And so I just have all of my professional stuff feed into my personal Facebook.
Yeah, I have not done what Dr. Delk has done. I kind of keep my life segregated based on platform. So my Facebook is my personal account. My Twitter is a professional account. My Instagram is personal. I'm trying to think. So so that's kind of how I've navigated that. That said, I think using something like Hootsuite or something like that we could see it, doing that multiple ways. And my lab started a lab Facebook account a few years ago, but our content on there is not. We aren't updating that very frequently. We played around with different things too. Like we have a blog on our website. Unfortunately, we haven't updated that in a year. It can be kind of hard to keep these things going. I think if you have a really motivated student in your lab who wants to take that on, they'll take it on and can do some really amazing things, and then they die whenever those students go on. But I kind of think that's okay in some respects. We're not content creators predominantly, we're academics, and so I think giving students room to kind of explore. I think that these things can be really helpful for students to kind of explore and think about science in other ways. So that's how we've used some of those things in my lab.
Wonderful. And it looks like we have another question for all of our panelists. What considerations should I make before I create a new social media account?
I guess I can start on this one. I would first consider if you have enough content or things to say on that account to keep it fed. If you only have like 1 or 2 posts a year on like an Instagram account, that's not worth the time starting. And I would make sure you can stick to a semi-regular schedule, especially if student workers can help. And they do come and go. I think what's great too is even if they come and go, you can at least point to the content that past ones created, be like, hey, this stuff is great to future workers. And this is the kind of thing that'd be awesome to keep going. So yeah, students are awesome at that. And I think a lot of students these days, I mean, they've grown up with social media. I was in high school when Facebook came out. So I was on the tail end of growing up without social media, really. But a lot of kids these days, I mean, this is what they've been raised on. So I think most of them have kind of a sense of how to do that if you do need some help creating stuff to feed those channels. So yeah, I would just make the first main thing I would consider is if I have enough things to say and things to feed this channel to keep it going and grow it, to really make it worthwhile. Otherwise, it's gonna, you might have a few posts and then you just let it go away, and then it sits there. And if people go to see, hey, I see this lab I'm interested has a Instagram, but the last post was 4 years ago, that might create a mixed message on what's going on too. So I'll just make sure that you can regularly maintain that channel. And if you can't, just make sure you might consider closing it out instead of just letting it sit there.
I'd like to piggyback on what Paul was saying about students helping to create content. So I was very intimidated when I first got on social media because I didn't know what I was possibly going to talk about. And my students have been really instrumental. Whenever they get awards, I use our lab page to showcase them. So whenever they get awards, a lot of them are very social media savvy. So they create TikTok videos, and they create videos that they send to me that I'm then able to post. And so that's been really helpful too. As Paul was saying, the generation now, they grew up on social media, so they have this thing totally figured out, and they help a lot with the content that we put on our page.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have an additional question. Is there a platform that you prefer more, and which platforms are better for different types of marketing?
As I was saying earlier, I am somewhat new, so the platform that I know how to use the best is Instagram. I am not very good with Twitter, so I'll pass that on to Kendra and Paul. Like I said, I'm learning so much from them.
I'll jump in. I feel like Paul is probably the best person to answer this question, but I will say that like I don't have a LinkedIn account for my lab because I feel like LinkedIn, I'm sorry, I didn't say LinkedIn. I mean Instagram, because I feel like Instagram is primarily a visual medium, and I'm not communicating, the way I'm communicating is not visual, like through images per se. I mean, I use images to get attention, but that's not the bulk of what I'm showing. And so I feel like that hasn't been, I'm not sure how I would use that. Whereas Twitter, I can do like, quick, pithy little things very quickly on there and convey information that way. So that's why I've chosen Twitter/X, or I chose that initially. So that's all I have to say. I'll throw to Paul because I feel like he probably has a lot more to say on this.
In brief, I would say Facebook is where a lot of students' parents are. There's a good segment of international students who might have Facebook as well. My beloved Twitter is much different than it used to be, but there's still good academic presence. Some students are on there. They're mainly on Instagram, I would say, primarily, especially younger students, as you might be looking at prospective high school students looking at colleges there as well. Let's see, LinkedIn is more of a professional peer-to-peer environment, although you can still have some fun on there. Some of our most successful posts on LinkedIn are kind of videos that might be more retrospective, and then our alums really like to see that still as well. So Facebook, parents / some international students / maybe some older students. Now that they have Reels on there too, you might get some students, but those are primarily on Instagram, the future ones. Then Twitter's kind of a mix, but a lot of academic discussions still take place there. A lot of different fields have good discussions. And then, LinkedIn more professional. And I will say, if you are in a department that might not have the visual component to feed like an Instagram account, you still might team up with, there's different options. If you're not present on one channel, you might team up with your school's channel, be like, hey, I do have this one thing I'm trying to push. Can we discuss on how maybe we can put on the NSM or the BBS one to see how that might be able to get showcased that way if you are trying to reach students specifically instead. And you can always message me if you need any assistance. I might not be able to do a post, but I might be able to steer you in the right direction or give you some input. Hope that.
Thanks, Paul. I wanted to jump in as well. I've been silent back here. I'm Danny. I help Taylor with the Office of Research and Innovation social media. And I just wanted to add a few things and just kind of explain what we do in our office. So we have 3 official Office of Research and Innovation social media accounts. Our Twitter, or X, we use quite often as our researchers use that predominantly. That's where we are predominantly. We use our LinkedIn account mostly for our innovation side of the house, information about our alumni, our startups, any major conferences and tech things that we're sponsoring, as well as job posts, hiring. And then, of course, I use my personal LinkedIn for personal professional development. And then we also have our Instagram. Our Instagram we use for bigger events, and we also use our Instagram for any student-focused events, student-focused things. I'm also going to use this opportunity, and then I will stop talking, to share with everyone my major thing about Instagram. I have a very strong opinion that Instagram should be used for high quality pictures. Paul and Taylor have heard this information from me quite often. I think, in my opinion, that any graphics on Instagram should go on your story, and you should keep the feed with high quality pictures, just because those things get so much more attention and they get so much more likes. So I will just end it at that. And thanks, Taylor, for letting me interrupt.
Can I add one thing to that, Danny?
Please.
Especially if it's event flyers, if you share it in story as well, you do have options to add links where people can click for more information. Unlike your feed, you can't. There are some workarounds, but some Instagram, case in point, we used a third-party service called Later.com that could help you with link in bios and kind of attaching links to a post. And Instagram didn't like that and threatened to suspend our account. So they don't always like you doing that. So if you have a flyer and you're wanting people to get to a link about maybe a open house or a program or an event, anything like that, if you do it in story, you do have an option to add a link button that they can go to see that more information there. And so I think that'd be another benefit of doing like flyers and things like that in story as well.
Thanks, Paul. And I just added one more thing for me. Our office in Instagram, we utilize Linktree in our bio. It's free, and so we'll say link in bio, and then you can click our link, and then there's just a bunch of links that we update through Linktree. And Taylor can talk more about that if she wants to, but that's kind of a good fix, or it's not a fix, but it's what we can use for kind of link in bio items.
Thank you, Danny, for that. It looks like we have time for one more question. Do you have any advice for us to get more followers? And this is just to all of you, whatever advice you may have.
I think, yeah, again, tagging, liking posts if you're tagged, or if you're just seeing, fellow, a peer at a different institution you might follow and they're having a conversation, or you see something that you like on their channel, you like that. I would check out some hashtags, maybe hashtag UT Dallas, or if your school has a hashtag, to check that out. You might be able to participate and like posts there. I would maybe like things that your school or department accounts might put out as well. Liking, tagging, share, engagement is kind of the best way to do it. Sometimes it can be a slow trickle, and sometimes it can be, you gain a lot in one post. Sometimes social media can be a fickle game, but I think as long as you're engaging and liking and sharing content, then that does add up.
And I'll add, just from the researcher's standpoint, I tend to get followers after I give talks. And so when I give talks, I always put up my social media handles.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I would second what Nikki just said about, making sure you put your social media handles up whenever you give talks. The only other thought I had was sometimes when people go to conferences, they'll kind of like live tweet the conference, like this person's up giving this talk, and like we'll do things like that I think can get some attention, because then especially if they do things like tag the person talking, then you can get some some eyes on you, I guess, that way. But I don't know that that would be my first, unless you're really comfortable with putting yourself out there like that. I don't know that that would be my first go-to strategy, but it's one thing I've seen people use pretty successfully.
We'll add one more thing. If you're like giving a talk or anything, if at the end, say, hey, you can find me on these channels. I'll be honest, in my email signature at the bottom of it, I say, hey, follow UT Dallas on this, and this. It may not get you a lot, but it's just another way you can put that out in front of people that, hey, I'm on social media, you can find me here.
Hey, thank y'all all for sharing that with us. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Paul, Dr. Seaman, and Dr. Delk for sharing your time and knowledge with the attendees today. Audience members, are you interested in additional Office of Research and Innovation events? Please follow us on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also, feel free to follow the links posted in the chat or scan the QR codes. Finally, please take a moment and complete our research events survey. Thank you again to our speakers. I hope our audience has a great rest of the day.